Some stories don't start with screams. They start with silence, the kind that warns you something terrible is waiting. That's exactly how the story of the Riker family begins. North Dakota, winter of 1888. Snow-covered land stretching for miles. No neighbors close enough to hear you yell. No lawmen near enough to save you. A place where danger doesn't need to hide because no one is watching. The Rikers had moved to this forgotten piece of land 3 years before the massacre. A quiet family that didn't cause trouble. William Riker, the father, didn't like to talk about his past. Some said he'd fought in the Civil War. Others claimed he'd killed a man in Missouri. Nobody ever asked him to his face. He wasn't the kind of man you questioned. Margaret Riker, his wife, was polite but distant, like she always had something on her mind. She kept her children close, raised them to work hard, and she never let them wander too far from the farmhouse, especially at night. They had 3 children. Elias, 17, strong-willed, more like his father than he wanted to admit. Sarah, 14, quiet but sharp, always watching. And Jacob, just 8 years old, still young enough to sleep with a wooden toy horse. People in the nearby town of Grimstead barely knew the Rikers. They only came to town when they needed to. Never stayed long, never joined Sunday church. They didn't gossip, didn't drink, didn't trust anyone. And people noticed. People always notice, but nobody expected what would happen next. January 12th, 1888, the last day, the Rikers were seen alive. The family rode into town in their wagon before a storm rolled in. Margaret bought flour, canned beans, and lantern oil. Elias loaded up feed for their horses. William bought ammunition, too much ammunition, 3 full boxes of .44 caliber rifle rounds. The shopkeeper tried to joke with him. "You hunting buffalo or starting a war?" William just stared at him, long enough to kill the joke without saying a word. He was on edge, watching the door, watching the windows, like he expected someone or something to walk in at any moment. Nobody thought much of it then. But by morning, the Riker farm would become the most feared place in North Dakota. That night, the snow came fast. The wind howled against the wooden walls of the farmhouse. The barn creaked. Something about the night felt wrong, not just storm wrong, different wrong, heavy wrong. William didn't sit by the fire with his family. He stood near the window with a rifle in his hands. Margaret kept the younger children close. Elias finally asked, "What are we waiting for?" His father didn't answer. His mother did. She looked at William and whispered, "Do you think they found us?" They. One word, one question. And suddenly Elias realized there was something his family was hiding, something dangerous. Then came the sound, a heavy wooden knock, not on the door, on the barn. William stood, loaded his rifle, and said 5 words that froze his family in place. Stay inside, no matter what. Whatever was out there in that storm, it wasn't lost. It came with purpose, and it came for them. The wind outside screamed against the walls like something alive. Jacob started to cry, but Margaret pulled him close and covered his mouth. William walked to the door, rifle in hand. Elias stood beside him, refusing to stay back even though fear crawled up his spine like ice. Another knock came, this time harder. Not the kind of knock you make when you're lost. Not the knock of a man looking for shelter. No, this was slow, deliberate, testing. William opened the latch just enough to shout without letting the cold flood in. "We don't want any trouble." Nothing answered. He shut the door. Then, from somewhere inside the storm, a voice finally replied, "Evening." It was calm, too calm, the voice of a man who knew exactly what he was doing, a voice that didn't ask permission. It waited for a reaction. Margaret's hands froze over Jacob's shoulders. Elias whispered, "Who is that?" William didn't answer. He opened the door again, this time fully. Snow blasted through the doorway, swirling in like white smoke. A man stood just outside. Wide-brimmed hat, long coat, face hidden in shadow. "Evening," he said again. William didn't lower the rifle. "State your business." The man tilted his head like he was amused by the question. "I mean no harm, just looking for shelter till the wind calms down." William stared hard at him. "You're not welcome here." The stranger exhaled, almost a laugh. "Maybe you should ask your wife what she thinks." Margaret went pale. He knew them. He knew who they were. William raised the rifle higher. "Leave, now." The stranger didn't move. He didn't shiver in the cold. He didn't blink. He just stood there, storm tearing past him as if it never touched him at all. "That your final word?" the man asked. William didn't answer. He fired. The blast cracked through the night and vanished into the storm. Elias flinched. Jacob screamed. Sarah dropped to the floor. Margaret closed her eyes like she already knew it wouldn't matter, because the stranger didn't fall. He didn't even bleed. He just stood there. Then he smiled. William stepped back, stunned. He fired again and again. Empty shells fell into the snow. The stranger didn't move. The bullets didn't touch him. They went through him. No, not through him. Past him, like they had missed on purpose. The storm grew louder, like it obeyed him. "You can't kill me, William," he said. "You know that." William slammed the door shut and bolted it. "Get to the back of the house," he told his family. "What is happening?" Elias demanded. William grabbed his son by the collar and pulled him close. "He's not a man," William whispered. "He's a debt." Elias didn't understand. A debt? What did that mean? The door shook violently. Dust fell from the rafters. Wood bent and groaned. Then the stranger spoke again from outside. "William Riker, I've come to collect." The door cracked down the middle, and Elias realized this nightmare didn't start tonight. It followed them here, and it finally caught up. The front door of the Riker house shook in its frame, each pounding hit stronger than the last. Snow blew in through widening cracks in the wood. The hinges screamed. Dust rained from the rafters. Margaret grabbed the children and moved them toward the staircase. "We have to get to the root cellar," she said. "No," William growled. "He'll trap us." "Then what do we do?" Elias asked. "We move, now." The door splintered again, this time sharp enough to cut straight through the family clock on the wall. The brass pendulum fell and shattered against the floor. William pointed his rifle at Elias. "Take your brother and sister to the barn," he ordered. "Get the wagon ready." Elias hesitated. "The barn?" "Yes," William snapped. "That's where the horses are. We ride east. Don't stop for anyone." Margaret grabbed William's arm. "You can't stay here alone." "I'm not buying time," William said quietly. "I'm ending this." There was a silence between them, heavy, unspoken, final. Margaret understood. She reached up and touched his face. "If you see him," she whispered, "don't listen. Don't let him speak to you." William kissed her hand, then pulled away. Another blow hit the door. This time, a hole snapped through the wood. Elias caught a glimpse. just a glimpse of something black moving outside. Not a hand, something like a shadow, reaching. William fired through the hole. "Move!" he shouted. Elias grabbed Jacob and Sarah and pulled them through the back door. Margaret followed. They fought against the screaming wind as they pushed through the snow toward the barn. The storm clawed at their clothes. The cold cut into their skin. Jacob cried as ice stung his eyes. Sarah stumbled and fell. Elias pulled her back up. "Go!" Margaret yelled. "I'll help her. Get Jacob inside." The barn loomed in the darkness, half hidden by snow. Elias threw the door open and pulled Jacob inside. The horses were in a frenzy, kicking, rearing, eyes wide with terror. "What's wrong with them?" Jacob whispered. Elias didn't answer. He didn't want to admit what he already knew. The horses weren't afraid of the storm. They were afraid of what was coming through it. Margaret and Sarah stumbled in behind them and slammed the barn doors shut. The wind outside roared like a living thing. The lantern inside flickered wildly. Margaret leaned against the wall, shaking. "Where's Papa?" Jacob asked. "He'll be here," Margaret lied. Something shifted above them. Wood creaking, hay sliding. Margaret looked up toward the loft. "Elias," she whispered, "we're not alone in here." Elias froze. He heard it too. Slow, deliberate footsteps right above them in the barn loft, moving through the hay, one step at a time. Jacob started crying again. Elias held him tight. Sarah squeezed Margaret's arm. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then a voice drifted down from the shadows. "You can't run from him." Elias stepped back. "Who's there?" A man stepped into view at the top of the loft ladder. He wasn't the stranger from the storm. He was someone else entirely. He was young, maybe 20, thin, pale skin, sunken eyes, wearing ragged clothes. "Who are you?" Elias demanded. The man didn't answer. He just stared, empty, hollow. Margaret stepped forward slowly. "No." Her voice broke. Sarah looked at her mother, confused. "Mama? Who is that?" Margaret swallowed, horror frozen on her face. That's my brother." Elias turned. "Your brother? You said your family was dead," Margaret whispered. "They are." The pale man tilted his head. His neck cracked as he moved. His voice was flat, lifeless. "He found us," he said. "He never stops." Elias grabbed the rifle. "Who? Who is he?" The pale man raised a shaking arm and pointed toward the barn door. But when they turned, the barn door was already open, and someone, had walked inside without a sound. Sheriff Thomas Hale had seen death before, but nothing like this. He stood alone inside the Riker barn the following morning, staring at the blood-drenched dirt floor as the winter wind moaned through the cracked boards. The massacre had already spread through the town like a disease. Neighbors whispered. Church bells rang. Mothers locked their doors. Hale crouched, running a gloved hand over a strange marking carved into the barn post. Something he hadn't noticed the night before. A circle with 3 slashes through it. Not letters, not numbers, not anything he recognized. He called out to the deputy behind him. "Elias, come look at this." Elias leaned close. "Any idea what it means?" Hale shook his head. "No, but someone took their time carving it. Thing was, the Riker family had no enemies, no debt, no known trouble, just an ordinary farming family. And that made this worse. Random evil was the hardest kind to predict." Outside, a bitter wind blew over the dead farmland, as if the earth itself was grieving. Snow flurries drifted across the fields. The land felt empty. But Hale didn't believe in curses. He believed in facts. So he started with what made sense. Interview the neighbors. Learn what they heard, what they saw, who hated the Rikers. Problem was, nobody hated them. Mrs. Boyd, the closest neighbor, swore she didn't hear a single scream that night. Strange, considering 5 people were slaughtered less than a mile away. "I don't understand it," she said, hands shaking as she spoke. "We keep our windows open at night. If something had happened, we would have heard it." Hale frowned. "You heard nothing? No shouting, no horses?" She looked terrified now. "Sheriff, you don't get it. It was too quiet, too quiet." That stuck in Hale's mind as he rode back to the Riker house. Something about this land felt wrong, and it wasn't just grief. Something else lingered here, something unseen. Inside the farmhouse, he found scattered belongings, a half-finished dinner on the table, a Bible open near the fireplace. Nothing looked broken, no signs of a struggle, no forced entry. But upstairs, inside Samuel Riker's room, he found something else. Hidden beneath the bed frame was a locked wooden box, old, heavy, carved again with that same strange symbol. Hale smashed the lock with his revolver butt and slowly opened it. Inside were 3 things: a brittle piece of animal hide with writing in a language Hale couldn't read, a rusted hunting knife wrapped in black cloth, and a folded note that simply read, "Never trust the land." It remembers Hale exhaled slowly. His heartbeat pounded in his ears. This wasn't just murder anymore. This was something else, something deeper. Someone had wanted this family dead. But why? And what was in that box? A warning? A curse? A secret they were trying to hide? As Hale turned to leave, a cold draft passed through the room, though the window was shut. He paused, just for a moment, and that's when he heard it. From the barn outside, the sound of wood creaking, like someone or something had just stepped inside. Sheriff Hale froze at the sound. That wasn't the wind. It wasn't an animal either. That creaking, it sounded like footsteps. Slow, intentional. Someone was in the Riker barn. He moved carefully down the staircase, every step landing without a sound. His hand gripped his revolver as he pushed the door open and stepped outside. The air was colder now, unnaturally cold, like a storm was gathering, but the sky was clear. He approached the barn. The doors were still wide open from earlier, but now they felt like a mouth waiting to swallow him whole. He called out into the darkness, "Who's there?" Silence. He stepped inside. Dust floated through beams of pale morning light. Blood still stained the dirt floor. The smell of iron and death lingered. He listened. Nothing. But he wasn't alone. He could feel it. He raised his revolver and spoke again. "Come out now. You do not want to test me today." Then he heard it. A voice, small and broken, from the far stall. "Sheriff, help me." Hale spun and rushed toward the voice, but when he reached the stall, it was empty. Nobody was there. The hairs on his arms rose. That voice, he knew it. He had heard it just the day before when he pulled a little boy's lifeless body from the dirt. It was Jacob Riker, the youngest son. But Jacob was dead. The sheriff stepped back slowly. He wasn't scared of killers. He had hunted men before, but whatever was happening here didn't feel like anything human. Then the whisper came again. Only now, it was behind him. "Sheriff." Hale turned. Nothing. A whisper again, this time closer, almost touching his ear. "You shouldn't have opened the box." His blood ran cold. He aimed his revolver into the shadows. Show yourself." No response, just a creaking sound above him, like someone was stepping in the loft. Slowly, one step, then another. He climbed the ladder, revolver ready. Each rung felt like a choice, like he could still turn back. But he kept climbing until his eyes rose above the loft floor. Empty. Just rotting hay and broken boards. He stepped off the ladder and instantly felt it, the weight of something watching him. Then something moved behind the haystack, fast. The sheriff fired. Boom! Silence. He rushed over, heart pounding, breath tight. He kicked aside the hay. A black-feathered raven exploded out, screeching. Hale stumbled back, gun raised. A damn bird. He let out a long breath. Maybe he was losing his mind. Then he saw it. Carved into the wooden beam of the loft, deep and jagged, was the same strange circle symbol he had found before. Only now, there was more. Words carved below it. Let the land feed. Hale stared, trying to make sense of it, when the barn door slammed shut. Not by wind, not by accident. Something had just locked him inside. And then he heard them. Footsteps. Dozens of them. But not outside. Not above. Under the barn. Under his feet. Something, many somethings, were moving in the ground below him. The morning after the massacre, Grimstead felt different. The air hung heavy, like a storm had passed, even though the sky was clear. Smoke from chimneys curled lazily into the cold. But there was a hush, a silence that pressed down on the few residents brave enough to leave their homes. Neighbors whispered about what they had or hadn't seen. No one had actually watched the Riker farm that night. No cries, no firelight, just gone. People avoided looking toward the old red barn, though everyone knew exactly where it stood, frozen in the distance like a wound in the landscape. Mrs. Boyd, the closest neighbor, refused to leave her home. "I saw nothing," she told anyone who would listen. Not a soul. Not a sound, but her hands trembled, and her cat wouldn't leave her side. The children wouldn't play outside. Even the wind seemed cautious, brushing past the houses with a whispered warning. Others in town claimed to have seen strange figures, shadows moving in the barn windows, though the barn had been boarded and empty for years. Some said they saw flickering lanterns, though no one had been there. And then the whispers began. "They're not gone," an old man said at the saloon, voice low. "I saw something moving in the snow. Something watching us." He swayed on his stool, pale and fevered. "I didn't dare go close." "You shouldn't either." Sheriff Hale went from house to house, asking questions, but nobody could provide solid answers. Only frightened murmurs. "The children, they weren't there," one mother said. "But sometimes I swear I hear them laughing in the wind." And that's when Hale noticed it. The same symbol from the barn, carved into doorposts and fences around town. Not everywhere, just in quiet corners, places no one passed often. Oddly clean cuts in the wood, as if made recently, but without anyone seeing. Hale shivered. He wanted to dismiss it, call it coincidence or vandalism, but the more he looked, the less he could deny it. Someone, or something, was sending a message. And it wasn't meant for the town. It was meant for the living. By afternoon, Hale returned to the Riker property. He approached the barn, careful, heart hammering. The snow had begun to melt slightly, but the tracks outside remained, too perfect, too deliberate. Some led to the barn, some led into the open fields, then disappeared into nothing. No footprints returned. Hale bent down, examining them, and there it was. Another clue he couldn't explain. A shallow circle pressed into the earth, just wide enough to contain a human body. Strange markings inside, like letters. Not English, not German, not anything he could recognize. He glanced up at the barn and froze. The loft hatch. It was slightly open, not moved by wind, not left that way by animals. Someone or something had been inside recently, and the moment he realized it, he heard it. The faintest sound of whispering. He couldn't place the words, but he could feel the tone. Warning, playful, cruel, the kind of sound that makes your skin crawl. He looked around. Nobody was near. The wind carried the sound, yet it seemed impossibly close, right next to his ear. Hale stepped back. He wanted to leave, but curiosity anchored him to the snow, the symbol on the barn, the vanished family, the whispers. He couldn't make sense of it. And then he noticed footprints he hadn't seen before, small, shuffling prints leading toward the barn doors. Not human. And as Hale stared, the doors slowly creaked open on their own. No wind, no one touching them. Just a slow, deliberate movement. He realized in that moment the nightmare wasn't over, and whatever haunted the Riker farm, it was waiting. Sheriff Hale didn't sleep that night. He stayed near the Riker farm, sitting on the frozen ground, watching the barn. Every so often, he thought he saw shadows moving behind the boards or caught a flicker of light in the loft window. But each time he approached, there was nothing. Only silence and snow, and that oppressive, unnatural stillness that pressed down on the land like a living thing. By dawn, Hale decided he had to go inside one last time. The barn doors, though closed last night, now hung slightly ajar. He stepped inside carefully, revolver drawn, every nerve screaming. The air was thick with cold and something else, something old, like the earth itself was holding its breath. Inside, the floor was littered with hay, but also the faint impressions of footprints, not human, not animal. They formed a circle around the center post of the barn where the symbol had been carved. Hale crouched, studying it, realizing the circle wasn't just decoration. It was a ritual, and the ritual was unfinished. He noticed a small trapdoor hidden beneath some loose boards. The moment he touched it, a whisper rose from below, soft, calling his name. Thomas! Thomas Hale! Hale's heart slammed against his ribs. He paused. No man could speak from that depth. No man could remain unhurt in the snowstorm. He lifted the trapdoor, peered inside, and the darkness seemed to stretch infinitely. A chill crawled up his spine. He thought he heard faint scratching, and then laughter. A single scrap of paper lay on the edge of the trapdoor. Hale picked it up. Written in the same strange script, it simply said, "The land never forgets, and it always collects." Suddenly, he felt it, something brushing his shoulder. He spun, but no one was there. Then a shadow flickered across the loft above him. He heard the soft, uneven breathing of someone or something watching. The barn seemed alive. Every board, every nail, every speck of hay hummed with a presence he couldn't explain. Hale realized he wasn't just observing the aftermath anymore. He was part of it. The Riker family, the stranger, the symbols, they weren't gone. Not really. They lingered, waiting, and the land itself had taken them, leaving only whispers behind. He stumbled outside into the morning light. Snow had begun to melt, revealing broken earth and faint markings leading off the property. Hale followed them, but the tracks disappeared into the fields, and with them, any hope of understanding. The townspeople avoided the Riker farm after that. Some claimed to hear faint voices at night. Others swore they saw shadows flitting behind boarded windows, but nobody dared enter. Not Hale, not anyone else. The barn sat empty, silent, and yet alive. And if you walk by the old Riker land today, when the wind blows just right, you might hear it too. Footsteps in the snow, whispers carried across frozen fields, and a warning no one understands. Some secrets never die, some families never leave, and the Riker farm, it still waits.